The difference between us as human beings and technology is we're not a set of outputs. It's the inner experience that we have that we want to protect and maintain. The very fact that, the machines can mimic our emotions, the machines can mimic our thinking processes, and in some cases, they're surpassing us. But what they can't mimic is the inner experience that we have.
This episode is sponsored by Perseverance.ac. Stuck in the idea phase? Building without direction? Do you have no revenue or growth? Perseverance has launched the never-ending startup accelerator to help founders build real businesses faster. Visit Perseverance.ac for more information.
Welcome to Mind the Machine, the podcast that really looks at the confluence of what it really means to be human in an ever-increasing artificial intelligence world. I'm your host, Cheryl Goodman, and I'm delighted to interview Dr. Michael Arena, just like the arena.
Yeah.
You probably fill arenas, I'm imagining, Dr. Arena.
Not the case at all. Not the case at all.
Well, you have a really impressive background. You're the dean, and currently you're the dean of the Crowell School of Business here at Biola University in Southern California.
Yeah.
This is the, can I say, hotbed of a confluence of AI with the research, the AI lab, progressive learning in a faith context. That's my immediate impression, but how would you characterize the school and the mission of the school?
Yeah. Well, we're certainly trying to be that. So very nice to connect on this, Cheryl, and looking forward to our conversation. We're trying to lead the way when it comes to AI thinking and ethical AI in particular. So one of the unique things about how we think about artificial intelligence is we start at the opposite side of the tech stack. So if you think about it this way, we're all playing with apps. We're all playing with every day. Like I get the kids teaching me new AI applications, teaching me how to automate workflows and everything else. We all talk about the tech and the models and, how do you build the right GPU and all that sort of stuff. But we start with the ethics layer underneath all of that. So,
Values.
what are the values? What are the core ethics? How do you decide when to use AI? And then, of course, that's biblically grounded. So the students will, they'll say this almost rotely now because they're so used to me asking, okay, could AI do that? That's great. But should AI do that? And then even more importantly, if so, how should AI or how would AI do that? So I think we're challenging the students to think about this more deeply than just picking up a tool, looking at what it can provide and applying it.
Right, and not the last mile, but because this type of technology is different than anything that we've ever seen before, even though it has the same flavor and smacks of what we've seen in internet, cloud, smartphone, all of these major transformations all over time. There's a lot of similarities, but there are a lot of differences. And before we dig into that question specifically, I'd love to give our listenership and viewership context of you. You have an impressive background, AWS, General Motors, I believe it was, many other things. Talk about your career trajectory and maybe what's led you to really lead here on AI.
Yeah. Oh boy, there are so many places to go there. So I'll give you the snapshot.
Okay.
I'm an engineer and not a software development engineer, an industrial engineer. So that's how I started my career. Studying processes, studying, optimization and organizational design and those types of things. But I became fascinated pretty early in my career about human dynamics and how people interact with other people. So that led me on the journey of really hanging my hat in the world of HR because there's no place else to do that.
Yeah.
But I'm a bit, I call myself not an academic, a pracademic. And because I love the research, I've studied it, I've done it, I've analyzed it, but if it doesn't work, if it's not practical, it doesn't matter. And that led me to, places like General Motors, where I was really blessed to be part of that, post-bankruptcy turnaround, which was an incredible ride journey for me. AWS, which was a rocket ship of a business when I was there, where we were literally trying to hire people as fast as the number one constraint at that point in time was SDE, software development engineer capacity. And then ultimately God just challenged me one day and said, okay, but is this really it? And what are you really going to do? And I had a bit of an awakening, and literally God yanked me out of AWS, and about a year later dropped me into Crowell School of Business. So,
Wow. That's an impressive story. And, when I think about General Motors and AWS, both really titans, both that are grappling with also to how they're arriving in changing business in the AI age. But the fascinating thing is human resources, even that name, human resources today is kind of a funny name, especially when we think about, the idea that, folks will manage bots and they'll manage, the promise of the new workforces. Or you'll be actually I was just on a conference call on the way down here and listening to the engineering teams really talking about they really don't believe there's going to be a reduction in jobs. Those jobs are going to change. The jobs will be managing these autonomous agents. And so we won't be building, but we'll be managing these systems. And now this wasn't on the questions list, but of course, I think about the practicality of that. And it's so intriguing to me that you were in the human resources side of that plus engineering. I mean, you're really at this very cool intersection,
yeah.
so I could see why, the school would thrive under your leadership because of that. You understand people and you understand, how we so deeply identify our jobs and our roles with ourselves, rightly or wrongly.
Yeah.
Right. And so,
We're at a by the way, for your listeners, we predicted we wouldn't get to the questions, and we didn't get to the first one. So I just wanted to throw that out there to everybody. It's fascinating. So there are like so many things to dive into in your comments, and the first one is we are as image bearers to start with. Like we are uniquely made in God's image, and so we are human beings uniquely made in. So the very first thing is, I'm amazed that I go back to the corporate world all the time. I do a lot of consulting. I'm amazed that I've grown up in a profession that is entitled human resources. And it's kind of profound right now that people are asking the question, what does it mean to be a human being? So the very first thing is like, I think we as believers have this incredible, frankly, ministry opportunity to describe what it actually means to be a human being. So at the very deepest level, I'll go there first.
yeah.
It's like, who are we? Well, you have to have a worldview to be able to get there.
Right.
And more often than not, people are, I've been amazed at how receptive people are to hear that worldview because of the fear, which gets to the second part of your question, the fear that many of us as human beings are beginning to feel right now. And that gets to, yes, we will have to interact with bots. Yes, I am an optimist, and from an economy standpoint, I believe in creative destruction, and jobs will go away, and certainly people will suffer from that, but new jobs will be created. And I'm of the belief that this is much like many other cycles in the past, but that doesn't. There are some differences, and the biggest difference is it's hitting fast, hard, and wide everybody in society. Not like the only people that had access to trains or automobiles in the past. So I think the fear factor, which gets to a fundamental second thing that you said, the fear factor is intense right now.
It really is.
So when I go back to work with companies, even tech companies that are pushing this stuff and mandating it in some cases, the human beings are afraid because everything that we grew up to know and where we find value, and frankly, where we get human dignity, is being threatened right now.
Yeah.
So I think this whole concept of human machine is we've been focusing a lot on the machine side, but not nearly enough on the human side.
Right. Yeah. And I think about even my first experience of having spent 10 years at Qualcomm and then a number of years at Sony on their robotics platform and autonomous driving platforms. We know artificial intelligence has been around really a long time.
Yes.
But it is that generative of 2022 is when we said, wait a second, for the first time, these systems mirror what looks like knowledge. And then that knowledge isn't that the culmination and the highest order of, even when we think about the Bible, right? What was the first, the apple is the first symbol of knowledge, right? And so there's a lot of metaphors in there of that really threaten what it means to be human. And I think what I've seen, and I'd love your insight here, is that difference between knowledge and wisdom. Wisdom of lived experience. I've lived and I've learned and I've emotionally experienced things versus I've read and I know things, kind of like a brochure versus a biography, or, like lived. So how do you impart that wisdom to the student body and to the students that are looking to round themselves out?
Yeah, it's such an important question. It's the essence of who we Biola are and what we're trying to be to the world, and certainly to these students. And again, I say that humbly with other academic institutions, Christian in particular, that we're partnering with. It's never been more important. A liberal arts, biblically centered education has never been more important, in my opinion. And I think that's for a couple reasons. One is it's easy to get lost in all the model evaluations and to look at them on the human trait level. I mean, frankly, they have surpassed every single human dimension that they've been tested against. In a single mode fashion. Image generation, image, scanning, understanding language, understanding math, understand even at the higher order, which just 18 months ago they were struggling with. The algorithms the models are figuring this stuff out. And there are all kinds of ways they're doing that. And I'm fascinated by it. But I think we got to be really careful to get to the core of your question, to not evaluate just the outputs of technology. The difference between us as human beings and technology is we're not a set of outputs. It's the inner experience that we have that we want to protect and maintain. And I go back to being image bearers, but also the very fact that, the machines can mimic our emotions, the machines can mimic our thinking processes. And in some cases, they're surpassing us. But what they can't mimic is the inner experience that we have. What they can't take away is that which is holy, that which is, revelatory, that which is deeply spiritual in our connection to our maker. And the thing that we impress upon all of our students here is, how do we maintain and protect human dignity? And that human dignity as image bearers is the spiritual experience we have between head and soul. Christians would call that, the duality of head and soul, mind and soul. And I think we've got to protect that. We got to remind students, yes, that machine, the Turing test was just beat, not far from, where we are now in San Diego just earlier this year. And it's taken us 50 years to get there.
Right.
And the way it was beat is not based on the intellect that it produced, which was already surpassing human capability, but its ability to mimic our emotions. And people selected the AI output 73% of the time over the human created or generated version. But that cannot be mistaken for an inner experience.
No, it can't. And just to double click, Turing test is that ability to be perceived as a human entity, but it's really a robotic. And so passing the Turing test is pretty significant, a milestone.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that is impressive. I'd like to take a step back. And you're right that I'm not sticking to the questions, even though they're fantastic.
Okay.
They're fantastic questions, but I'm intrigued because my prior interview, and the one that's actually running right now, is with Ali Llewellyn from Glue, who was head of Open, NASA scientist for strategy for 20 years. And one thing that she said in the interview that I thought was amazing, and you've just said it in your intro, and I just am so intrigued by this, is she had said, how could she work on something when the stakes are so high relative to AI? Paraphrasing here, right? Is like, why wouldn't I work on the most important thing that I could work at in our time, which is this artificial intelligence, the confluence of faith, and how people are evaluating themselves technically, and that really predicated her move. And you had said in your intro is that you had felt God moving in your career to bring you over into Biola. So if you're open to it, I'd love to hear about how can we help people hear that voice when God is calling them to do something. How do we discern that? And that's a big question. So do you want to skip it? We can, but but I love how people come to hear the voice of God so much so that they move their careers.
Yeah, no. If you saw an expression on my face, it wasn't because I wanted to skip it. It's because I don't think I'm the authority on this. It's such an it's a very important point. Even one of the biblical principles. First of all, Ali's awesome. So she's one of my favorite people on the planet. And secondly, one of our biblical principles is praying for discernment anytime we engage in and or use AI, and to guard against great deception or misuse. But I think the key is just, it's the biblical, it's the spiritual disciplines at the end of the day. So the real true answer to your question is, I really loved Amazon. I loved it. It was incredible. I was working with the world's smartest people. We were moving super fast. I felt like I had found my people, to such an extent that that's all that mattered. To such an extent that I was so zoned in, locked in, that all of a sudden, 8 hours became 10, 10 became 15, 15 became 18.
Because you loved it, right?
And, I was waking up and I was going to bed and I was thinking AWS and all. And again, I'm not incriminating the organization. It's a phenomenal institution. I'm incriminating myself. We're called to be balanced. We're called to be, first and foremost, to, put our God first. And I have put second things first. So I was very blessed to have an accountability partner who called me out, literally called me out. And the true story, without going into the deep details of it, was I started to plead with the person who called me one day and said, "What is happening with you?" And I started to plead with him, "I need 18 more months. It's okay. I just need 18 more months. Like I'm gonna make some changes, but I got 18 more months." And just for your listeners, the 18 months was a stock cliff, which I'm embarrassed to say out loud.
Hey.
But he said these words to me, "Michael, I don't know if your soul has 18 more days." Wow. And it was an awakening, as I had referenced it before. So Bill said those words to me that day, and I resigned on Monday.
Wow, that's such a powerful story. I think this is the same thing that's happening with AI and people, where they are obsessed, guilty as charged, right? I remember, in November of 2022, really looking at this and going, it was that iPhone moment, that would happen in 2017, or any other moment, where you're instantly consumed in full what? To what end? And I think that you're probably really good at your job and probably really blessed a lot of people in their careers. And because I think HR is probably the hardest job. And then to have an engineering background on that, what an amazing blessing you were to people, like I imagine. So it's easy to see how one can be cleave so deeply to that. And then our identity starts to form on that. And thank you for sharing that, because I think this is what folks are struggling with, is how do I get back to a balanced life? How do I get back to being me, especially with the rate of deep addiction to social media that's now intertwined with AI-generated content that is so sticky that I find myself having to, physically, my sister just sent me the brick to block the phone.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. She's in ministry. She's at Impact Church, or their head of operations. She's like, "I think you're spending too much time on your phone." Mails me the brick, and I'm like, noted. So, as you, as a leader, are building curriculum and the jobs of the future here at this university, how do you help balance that for future leaders? And
Yeah, that's the privilege and honor. That's why I am at times ashamed to share the story I just shared, but that is God's mark on me to be able to influence other people. And it may be a different story for them, of course. But, and God doesn't want us to be shy about sharing those kinds of stories, right? So there's, first of all, you mentioned glue. We took the students to a glue hackathon last week, and we took 3 student teams, and we won 2 of the 11 competitions. So I was I'm a proud papa of all the phenomenal work that these students are doing. Many of them were freshmen, who had only been on campus for like 3-4 weeks, and were just so fascinated about playing around with AI. But the most important part of that story is, one, they got a solution for your brick. It's an app that they built. So one of the winners was called Flora. And it was basically a monitoring mechanism for your social media use so that you can be triggered to remind yourself that, in fact, God wants more from you than that. And they won the vibe coding competition.
Nice.
But and I think in that story is embedded the nature of what we try to do here. The difference, and I've already said this once, but the difference between, say, us and some of the brilliant technology universities that will go much deeper on the tech side than we will, they're skipping past the ethics, and they're talking about ethics. So it's not as if they're trying to do this intentionally. They just haven't been taught how to think about ethics in the same way that a liberal arts biblical education might do. So we're challenging our students to think about human dignity and creative capacity and discernment and relationships.
This is the hard stuff. I think this is the hardest.
So it's incredibly hard, and it's so easy to get infatuated by the tech, which I do. And we got to constantly remind ourselves that even in Genesis 1, I sometimes feel like I'm an advocate for the tech because I'm always talking about AI and how AI is going to help challenge us to do all these wonderful things, including reducing costs and amplifying education and good, worthy things. But I constantly got to remind myself, just like the students, that we are called to be stewards over the earth and shepherds of these things, not advocates for. And, that's our biblical obligation. And so we constantly think about that from a standpoint.
No, and I think this is really important, especially California just enacted, actually, I think it's active January 1st. I'll forget the bill number, but really is when we think about emotional intelligence, bots is the guardrail surrounding that anyone under 18. And so we're starting to see legislation come in, but it's actually really, I think that it's not too late, but it's certainly past due. And I'm sure you've seen that MIT study that came out saying 95% of these AI integrations are failing. And some folks and some commentary on that is because of the lack of the underpinning of values and trust. How do you automate trust when this is a values-based system? So in many ways, you're doing the most complex and hard, deepest work that there is to be done, as I see it. So
this is actually a topic that I think about all the time. Because again, being in the human dynamics field my entire career, if we can perform with the AI at the same human dimensions as you and I can, then what in fact are we as human beings supposed to do? And I think the answer is there are some things that are going to be elevated about us. And so I'm literally writing. I spent my summer on this research, so this could be a long answer. Wow. But what are some of the enduring human skills that will become more important? In fact, even elevated above and beyond the technical knowledge or the professional knowledge. So just to put a perspective on that, technical skills have a half-life of about 2.5 years right now. So what you and I learn from a technical standpoint, half of that's irrelevant, 2.5 years from now. Professional skills is somewhere closer to 4.5 to 5 years. Human skills are enduring. How do we influence? How do we build trust? How do we work in teams? How do we lead? How do we, frankly, lead with empathy or engage with empathy? And I think those things, which we would sometimes call soft skills in the past, are going to become more important to your and my ongoing performance. They've always been important. They've just been underrepresented. So I believe that, empathy is going to matter immensely in this landscape of us interacting with bots. And I do believe that we're close to that. We're seeing lots of early signals about what's changing with work. And I spend a lot of time on the future work. And we're working in smaller teams. We're working at velocities that are 1 to 3 times faster. And all that means is we need to make decisions and influence people and build trust faster than ever. So those are the things I'm long about, and that's what we try. So we have taken our curriculum in our master's program and bachelor's program, and basically have outlined 6 enduring human skills, and have mandated that every single class is teaching how do you work in a team, how do you stand up and influence, how do you persuade, how do you build trust. because those are the things that are going to matter more than ever in the future.
And I think that is mind blowing. I can't wait to read the results of your research. Imagine a book of some sort. Oh, wonderful! Yes, I'll be the first one to buy it. And then we'll have to bring you back on the show, of course, to hear those insights. But I think that's not being said enough. And as someone who spends a lot of time in the entrepreneurial environment and looking at a lot of businesses that are cropping up, some of these automations, just because, just as you said in the beginning, just because you can question it as you should. And it has a lot to do with analytics of predicting outcomes, whether it's sports betting or gamifying things or making things more addictive. This isn't good for humanity, and I think that this is ultimately why this podcast, Mind the Machine, is really about how can we be more human in how we show up. And it sounds like that is the good work that you are doing here at Biola. Okay, so back to the questions here. We'll get back on track. Let's see. So trust is a central theme of both faith and business. In a world where we are increasingly relying on machines to make judgments or predictions, how do we build or preserve trust? Who is accountable when an AI system fails or deceives? Now, I know legally is the entity that's creating and extending it has the liability, just from a business standpoint. But we're talking again about that core trust. How do you build that trust? I think you answered that in your prior question to some extent.
A little, but I think I mean, as a user, I think we're accountable. If I'm going to use something and it's going to generate output, even though it's a transformer, literally, of insights into some sort of synthesis. If I'm shopping that around, if I'm pushing that out there, if I'm partner with a customer base or trying to sell content that was generated, pick any model, it doesn't matter. They all have their different biases. It's my responsibility to ensure that it's accurate and correct before I start to market it or push it out, or in my case as a dean, before I advocate for students to leverage it or use it. And I think, I understand that the legal entity at the end of the day is accountable for a certain, in the legal world for a certain portion of this, but I also think we as users are. And I think that's why we as believers, we should not remember, even using this, a lot of Christians are using, and I do, for certain purposes, are using large language models and ChatGPT or any other large language model to interpret scripture or to even quote verses. And the reality is, if you go write in your favorite verse, John 10:10, whatever it is, type in your favorite verse, you'll get a different answer if you ask the question 10 different times, because that is the way that AI is designed. So then the question is, should they be accountable for that, or should you? If you're advocating and pushing that verse out, and there's subtle differences, thankfully, but the theologians aren't happy about those subtle differences because they can change, interpretation radically. And then that's not even, taking the inferences on that verse and putting it into the worldly context of how the model was trained. So then the question becomes, if you are a Christian and you are leveraging those models to build a tool for, I don't know, prayer or outreach or whatever, which you should try to do because there is a lot of good in that, who's responsible if it's wrong? And the answer, I think, is you as a user, you as an amplifier or supplier to others. And I think accountability exists in every step of that process is what I'm trying to say.
I love that. And I ask that question a lot. And that's the first time that I've gotten that answer about the individual. And I really do love that. Yeah, of course, you got to check because of the way it's designed of the hallucinations, but not to that level. And actually, Ellie and I even discussed that in the last podcast is, spending time in the Word is really a great way to start your day, to reset. If you're spending time in a large language model in the Word, are you getting, that accurate meaning? And it only takes that slight, change in that word to the interpretation. And I do look at that core, how large language models are trained from the word embeddings to the when you mean bank, is it a river bank? Is it a savings and bank?
Exactly.
Those knowledge graphs. Like this is heavy duty work, but very followable concepts of the context of where words live, right? And so
Yeah.
when I think about these systems being built, is can they ever really manifest the word of God?
I
Truly.
I think this is why Christians have to be engaged in artificial intelligence. And I speak to people all the time who of our faith that would say to me, why in the world are you engaging in AI? And the answer is because I want to shape its human value and I want to shape its eternal impact. I want to shape its ability to speak truth and just take Bible translations. That's what we were just talking about, or Bible. Actually, in this case, what's being generated, from a given translation directly into Scripture. There's a solution for that. And if we as Christians step up and take joint accountability for pushing back on the tech companies, and again, I'm not pushing on tech,
Not
to be
bad.
anybody,
Right.
but pushing back on the tech companies and hold them accountable for, hey, you're using tokenized, weighted tools that are really good for general understanding, but not good for specific, interpretations of Scripture. There's a way around it. They could embed, just like they have with mathematics, they put a calculator in the tool, and because
Right.
AI is really bad at math.
Right.
But if you drop a calculator in there and you're using a deterministic system inside of this system that's tokenizing data, why not put the Bible in the tool to where it's driving exactly the translation that is, and then it's 100% accurate. But that requires us to step up and take
To lead.
accountability and to, unlike what we did with social media,
Right.
where we buried our head in the sand and are suffering the consequences 10, 15 years later with the loneliest generation on planet Earth. We've got to exercise our rights in this case. We've got to steward over, God's creation. Technology is God's creation, and it is our responsibility to step in and manage that
Yeah.
and not be passive users and complainers about what it could do.
Right. Or to just unplug, because unplugging doesn't really help future generations discern value. And you've got to be equally yoked in terms of the scriptures tools. And I think about even medical miracles, doctors' hands perform miracles. We don't thwart, cancer treatment. We pray alongside these things. Modern miracles can happen with people's hands and tools. So it's like, why would this be any different? And I think what I've noticed and what I wrote my book, which is now I feel like a lifetime ago, and I need another one to come out, is that people tend to deify or demonize. And it really is that middle ground, is I think what you're really trying to say is, let's maybe not put so much emotional energy in this. This is ultimately, it's probably more than a tool. It's more than a software integration. It's like, hey, we're not upgrading your Microsoft. It's more than that. But it's also less than the energy that you're giving it. So if we can calm down and get in a calm state, then we can learn these concepts.
Well, there are so many learnings here for so many different topics. I tend to think of it as, AI is not dystopia or utopia. It's neither. And it's somewhere in between, and it's going to change on every application, every dimension. And there are times where I am just fear-stricken about misapplications and abuses. And we talked a little bit about those, suicides and other things that are just disastrous that are happening that would cause some of us to think that this is the dystopian society on the horizon. And then I see how it, improves the cancer treatment rate or detection rate of breast cancer by 17%. That saves how many, potentially millions of women long-term or others as you apply it to other, and how many new, the genome model from DeepMind just recently discovered, I think it was like 17 days, 800,000, I'm getting the numbers wrong. It was 400,000 new materials that would have taken 800 years for you and I as human beings.
We can't.
So the breakthrough possibilities are phenomenal, and the disaster side of it is equally phenomenal, and that's why we've got to be engaged with.
Yeah, all hands on deck on this one, for sure, for sure. Okay, so we're going to round it out with a few final questions here and keep you on time with your busy schedule. So, What would you tell a prospective student? I feel very fortunate that I'm in driving distance to this university, but what would you tell someone who wanted to come and attend this school about what they could do here?
Mhm. I think of it really simply. We build the humans that build AI.
Oh, I love that.
And I just think that like we have reversed engineered this technology in such a way that we're building the tech and thinking about the humans, not building the humans that think about the tech.
Mm.
And there was I think his name is Mark Clegg, who was at one point a diplomat in Parliament, I'm sorry, deputy prime minister in Parliament in the UK, and he went and worked for Meta. And he uses these words, and I'm paraphrasing, that really struck me hard. And it's not that the tech companies aren't trying to ethically apply this; they think they are. The problem is they haven't been trained to think ethically. And I think, and that's not an incrimination.
That's just it is what it is.
It's
Yeah.
just that a liberal arts, biblically centered education helps to challenge you to think ethically first, and more deeply, critical thinking and human judgment and all those types of things. So I think that's what a student gets is this well-rounded education on human flourishing and human dignity and who we are as image bearers. And then you learn the tech on top of that. And that's why it's at the top of the stack and not the bottom of the stack.
What keeps you up at night about the technology? We talked about that danger side, but what also helps you sleep deeply? What gives you that hope?
Uh, I know how the book ends.
There you go.
So it's
Spoiler alert.
so it's like so easy to get frustrated on days, to see stories in the media where this stuff is being misused and abused, and I'm disheartened by that because it's hurting fellow human beings. It might even hurt us at times. I'm disheartened by that, but at the end of the day, we know how this book ends. And there's somebody once said there's not a square inch that our Creator hadn't thought about, hadn't built, hadn't been in command and control over. And this is true of AI as well. So at the end of the day, we can easily get caught up in the fear. I choose not to do that. I choose to think about how I can co-author a future with our Maker in a way that's better than one that is being built by someone who doesn't have our faith convictions and ethical thinking.
Right. No, that's really good. So what didn't I ask you that you think is important to address or discuss or understand?
I think lots. I mean, there's so many things.
We need a part two already.
I think the first thing is like we're just in the early days here. And we're just in the early days. We can make this better. We've seen it get better already. We've seen it become more ethical. We've seen bad models come out and be reversed. Just like we as believers can learn from the missteps with social media, I think the technology community is learning from those, and they're more responsive. They are more thoughtful about the revisions of these models. And yeah, we're all going to mess up. And I think granting a little liberty and grace over how these things come online and what we do to take accountability for that. So those are the things that I think about, and we talked a little bit on, and then that's what we're trying to do here at Biola. So we've got early days. We got an artificial intelligence lab where the kids are geeking out every single day, but that's not useful if we're not practically applying it. So we got a studio, AI studio, where the kids are building
Venture
tech
studio. I think
Venture studio.
very nice.
The kids are building tech and they're embedding it in solutions for kingdom impact. And then, we just launched I'm really proud of this new adaptive MBA program we just launched, which is how do you infuse it with AI, but focus on those enduring human skills, and stay current with the world that's changing skill sets, again, depending on which skill set you're looking at, every 3 to 5 years. So, those are the things that we're really
And maybe
excited
the
about.
Engage X series too. Maybe touch on that.
Yeah, so part of this is a university can become very insular, and a university can become so focused on educating the students and going deep that it loses sight of staying external and being relevant. So a couple of things we're doing is I mentioned the MBA program. We're bringing in tech leaders, someone from Google, someone from Amazon, someone from Nike to teach those classes because they're currently applying this stuff and applying new thinking processes to keep us fresh and innovative. And we're bringing in people we're blessed to have you be joining us
Looking
here.
forward to it. November 6th.
And, so we're bringing in people like Cheryl to help us think about how do you really, think about the machines and how we would implement them. So we've been very blessed to have a platform where, deep thinkers, everything from geopolitical challenges. We had Glenn Kitchen here, who's an expert on geopolitical challenges and cybersecurity. And we've had deep tech folks come in, and certainly we talked a lot about ethics as well. So and venture is coming up.
So you're seeing really connected, and I would say I am incredibly impressed. I guess my only regret is I hadn't really known about Biola before, and so I learned about Biola through an amazing innovator in San Diego, and really delighted to see your partnerships with Glue and Fake Tech, and I think that this is ultimately the future. So thank you for your time, your insight, your wisdom, your leadership, and thank you for watching Mind the Machine podcast. And I can't wait to see who comes on next to talk about all the values that will undergird these systems so we can, continue to look forward and have hope in the future.
It's my pleasure.
All right, thank you.
Make sure you're subscribed to Mind the Machine podcast, like the video, and leave a comment letting us know what you thought.